gentlemen, boys and girls, the Clyde Beatty Cold Weather Circus proudly presents, for the first and only time anywhere, Mr. George Plimpton on the flying trapeze. Having played quarterback with the Detroit Lions, basketball with the Boston Celtics, boxed 3 bloody rounds with champion Archie Moore, and engaged in countless other daring feats, Mr. Plimpton, a vigorous reporter in the constant quest for the truth, will now undertake with the Flying Apollos the most difficult and dangerous challenge of his career. He will attempt to hurtle into space at breakneck speed, release himself in midair, be caught by his ankle, pirouette back to his bar, and return to the high platform. All eyes, please, over ring number 3.
Well, here goes nothing.
Plimpton, the man on the flying trapeze, is brought to you by...
Another day in the big city. I was in there somewhere amongst the millions of my fellow creatures. And like most of us, I was frustrated at being a captive of concrete and all that goes with it. But one event set this day apart from the others. The circus big top had been raised on the outskirts of town, and we could escape to where one expects the individual still reigns supreme. A pleasure dome where performers seem to conquer what beleaguers the rest of us. The fear of heights, for example, or the terror we have of wild animals, or the inadequacies of our own limbs. A man can actually stand on one finger, or a girl can spin her body in the air without apparent effort, where we can envy extraordinary teamwork. Even gravity itself can be defied.
All eyes, please, over ring number 3. Presenting the most daring, talented, and graceful exponents of aerial art to be seen beneath any big top in the world, the Flying Apollo.
The flying trapeze, perhaps the most thrilling escape of all from the bonds of everyday humdrum existence. And sitting there with Frank McCloskey, who owns the circus, I turned to him half on a whim and asked, "Frank, what would you say to my trying that? Just to get a sense of it. I'd love to write about it." Without batting an eye, he replied, "Well, the circus has had its share of bizarre acts. Why not? If you'll get yourself in shape," he said, "it can be arranged. By all means, be our guest."
2. Very good, Mr.
Once in training, I began to have severe second thoughts about joining the Apollos. First of all, I'm not properly constructed for flying the trapeze. The people who do such things are usually small and wiry, with long careers of gym work behind them. On the other hand, I weigh 190 pounds, and I'm 6'4", with long, spidery arms, which just didn't seem to be up to the task.
3.
First time I came in here, I couldn't even chin myself once. I've now gotten to 2. With 1 month to go, perhaps I won't go through this nightmare that I keep thinking of, that when I grab the trapeze up there on the platform, I'm going to swing off into space, not have the strength even to hang on to the bar, and I'll plummet into the... There's a net, fortunately, but still I don't wish to go through that embarrassment particularly.
That was the nightmare, unable even to hold on, and I pushed myself to make sure it wouldn't happen. As I got more in condition, I now and then allowed myself the ridiculous fantasy of somehow being able to take to it naturally, suddenly appearing as graceful as Alfredo Cardona, the international idol of millions in the golden age of the circus during the 20s and early 30s. Cardona was one of the first flyers to master the triple somersault, but his most spectacular achievement was the manner in which he returned to the bar, pirouetting with a style and finesse equaled by no other aerialist. Of course, the trouble with daydreams is that they are delicate and they fragment and disappear, particularly as the time for my actual commitment approached.
All right, watch. Pick it up. Pick it up. Pick it up. Pick it up. Come on, Pete. Come on, move up, Pete. Come on, let's go.
I joined the circus early one spring morning as it arrived in North Philadelphia for a 10-day engagement. The general manager, John Pugh, an ex-acrobat, is responsible for the entire circus operation. The biggest pressure on him every day is to get the giant tent up well before the matinee. For this, he relies on the 40 or so roustabouts who travel full-time with this circus, men known only by their nicknames like Bird Liver, Sheepskin, Dry County, Gypsy Red. Salvation Bill, one of them is, for being out of the Salvation Army. The Philadelphia date opens under a new canvas, $45,000 worth, John told me, with a replacement already on order. But by the season's end, the tent will be in tatters from this incredible routine, repeated nearly 200 times in as many cities. The fireproof tent covers an area the size of a football field, with enough seats for 4,000 people and floor space for the 3 large rings.
Start in 3 minutes.
The majestic big top is pretty much a thing of the past in America. Ringling Brothers gave theirs up in 1956 and now perform in auditoriums. But happily, the Beatty Circus keeps the tradition going.
Once the show starts, we stop selling tickets. That way you'll miss no part of it. Anyone else like the ticket? Last call. 3 men selling tickets until how many?
With the excitement of the 3 rings and such a variety of acts going on, it was hard at first to sort everything out, or who everyone was. There were a number of things I thought I'd like to do to get a feeling of it all. I thought I might venture into the lion's cage, if very briefly. And of course the clowns, I could look into that. But mainly, I was occupied with the finale of the show, the Flying Apollo Act. Up close, even the simple tricks they did in the beginning suddenly seemed full of risk and terribly remote from anything I'd ever tried before. The catcher was Phil Schott. He and his wife Fran started out with a comedy Tarzan routine in which Fran performed in a gorilla suit. The other 2 flyers were both young men from California, both gymnasts, one of them the national collegiate champion on the horizontal bars in 1969, Richard Grigsby. And the other, Dennis Sherman. He was discovered on a Santa Monica beach doing quadruple somersaults off the rings into the sand, the only person known to master this feat. It was, amazingly, the first season with the circus for all 4, and the first time any of them had tried the high art of the trapeze.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, you've been a wonderful audience. We sincerely hope that you've enjoyed the circus. Good afternoon, everyone.
Okay, George, before you go up, there are a few fundamentals we better go over.
Back here.
The man who put the Flying Apollos act together was Bob Yerkes. He's an impresario who organizes aerial acts, and he's a famous catcher in his own right. He now had the dubious distinction of preparing me for my one public performance, and he had but 10 days to do it in.
Let me know. Call her down. Okay.
The ladder was a spindly, swaying rope affair. Certainly it couldn't hold 190 pounds. Only 25 feet, they said, but it seemed to me to go on up forever and ever. I'd been told the idea was to reach the platform and grab the trapeze, then swing off, drop, land on your back, and then try it again, but never to look down.
Get over into the middle of the board now.
Well, of course you do look. It's impossible not to, regrettably.
It seems a little high, but you'll get used to it. Now, Richard, swing off, and I want you to drop to the net so we can see what it looks like to drop to the net. And I'll call you when to drop. Okay, this time we'll drop. Ready? Up. Okay, you'll try the same thing now. Grab a hold with one hand, and as you leave, lean back.
All of it seemed much too rushed and quick. The trapeze seemed awfully heavy. It weighs about 8 pounds, and it tugs at you, almost like a living thing.
Okay, next time. Just take your time.
Okay, I think I'll try.
Okay, stand up straight. Lift, that's, whoop.
There it was, my nightmare come true. It was something wrong with leaving the platform, toppling forward so that my weight snapped at the bottom of the swing and ripped me off.
You jumped into the bar. Yeah. You got to...
Better run up and do it again.
All right, just take your time going up. Swing it. Just swing the bar. Starting to get used to it?
What?
You're starting to get used to the height now?
No.
Okay. Just let me know when you're ready. Here. Reach out for it. That's it. Lean back away from it.
Yeah, I'm good, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I think I'll try it now.
Okay. Good. Good. Lift your legs up, head up. Whoop.
It came as a surprise, really. No catastrophe, no nightmare, but a great exhilaration in that first long swing in space.
Good. Good.
Well, watch your fingers now and then.
Yeah, that was a little better.
Yeah.
God, that makes
How's your hands feel?
That
See
feels
you,
fine.
sir.
Boy, it is something when you soar out there. It really is terrific. Really
Sort of leave your stomach, don't you?
Yeah.
Like an elevator.
Well, that's really terrific.
The Philadelphia stay would be the longest of the season, and by the next morning, everyone had pretty much settled in. A good time to wander about the lot, the backyard as it's known, and look in on people and catch them at their jobs. Singeing the tough hair off the elephants with a blowtorch, which is a procedure Fred Logan does about twice a year, since the long bristles collect a coat of dust and mud. There are not as many people to meet in a circus as you might think, because almost everyone has 2, even 3 jobs. Fred Logan leaves his elephants before the show and walks to a little tent just by the main entrance to run the Shetland pony concession for the children. Roger Boyd, the ringmaster, is also the artist in residence, painting everything from the truck signs to the lavish posters of the Midway.
Doors! Doorway!
Doors, John Pugh has yelled to his ushers, who are in fact all performers. Doubling on tickets, there's my fellow flyer Richard Grigsby. Pedro Perez also sells tickets, and in the performance, he and his wife become the Coopers, a juggling act. He's somewhat transformed by a toupee, and then later in the show, back as Senor Pedro, he performs a sword and fire balancing act. There are the Zerbinis, as the ringmaster announces them, a tumbling act that one would guess from the name is presumably Italian in origin. But then an hour later, they've turned into a French troupe, a high wire act, one of the very best, known as Les Blocs. And there, doubling in an aerial cradle act and billed as Phil and Francine, are 2 of the Flying Apollos. All these multiple activities of circus folk provide them with what is known as cherry pie, extra money.
From Vienna, Austria, we bring
And finally, on the subject of doubling, here is the Ferry Forst family with a bewildering illusion act. the permission of the management, I've been allowed to reveal that Uta was the girl in the cannon, and Bridget, her twin sister, the lady in the moon. After the matinee on the second day, I went up again. Bob Yerkes was handling the pulleys to a belt contraption I was wearing. It's called a mechanic, and all performers, aerialists, equestrians, and so forth, use it when they practice to help break a fall. Bob thought it'd be advisable to wear right up to the public performance.
Get ready. Up. Get forward.
Assuming I'd make it.
Leaning forward at your rear end. Not too much. Try to be here, and then lift, and then hang right away.
The weight increases violently.
Yeah.
Just at the nadir of the
bar. Okay. Let's try it once more. Then just this time, get the bar up higher and then hang right away. Get all your weight on it right away. If you've got your weight on it to start with, then you won't get a jerk. Let's try it once more. Keep your hips out now. Ready? Up. Feet together. Yeah. Okay, this time we're going to drop. Up. Good. Dennis, you sure George the next step?
The next step was, in fact, what would be the last part of my aerial act, getting back to the platform. Bob said there was no point in proceeding to the trick itself, being caught by Phil in what's called a feet across, until he was certain I could get back to where I'd started from.
same thing.
Yeah.
Keep at it.
Okay, ready? Relax. Up. Right. No.
The break is a snap of the body to gain impetus to reach the platform.
Right.
And then, with still a long way to go, one small step, as it were.
That's not bad, George, but you got to get your hips up.
Starting in there right now. Continuous exhibition, you don't have
The
to
circus has originated any number of cultural traditions, among them, of course, its own extensive lingo. John Pugh is known as the gaffer, responsible for the entire show, referred to as the trick. Ticket salesmen are ducat grabbers, and what they take in is called alfalfa. Toy balloons are bladders, sold by rubbermen. Programs are called Bibles, dispensed naturally by Bible salesmen. To toot up is vernacular for what the calliope does to attract attention.
Ran away several times. It kept bringing me home.
Chuck Schlarbaum, the band leader, plays the calliope before each show, and he's been at it for 15 years.
A combination of both, but if I wasn't in the music business, I would do something else around the show, I'm quite certain.
Perhaps the most intriguing aspect of the circus is its ancient ability to entice new people into it. There was no lack of the young and attractive joining the Beatty show, but I had yet to discover what it was that drew them to this life. A schedule of 14, sometimes 16 shows a week, a routine which seemed to be so exhausting and surely must finally become monotonous.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, in all three rings, the world's largest herd of performing elephants.
Of course, for me, there was still nothing beneath the big top that wasn't a feast for the eye. Always the most formidable showstoppers, Fred Logan's elephants, or bulls. And I learned they serve numerous other functions as well. John told me how on one occasion in New England, a motorcycle gang came down on his crew for a rumble, a big one.
Finally, we got an elephant up in front of the midway, and we sneaked him round the back of the tent, and they give him a big chain, and then they run this elephant down the midway.
Oh,
And of course, it's quite an awesome sight to see this elephant trumpeting with a chain, swinging back and forth. And lucky he didn't get near anybody, but he certainly put the enemy to rout, and it made it a much easier way to get him off the midway instead of have to battle for about half an hour waiting for the police to come and break it up.
That's an ultimate weapon if I ever heard of one.
Well, I think we're going to try and send it to the Pentagon and see if they can use it in some way.
After each performance, in the quiet of the deserted tent, I continued my training. Frankly, I didn't look forward to it. By the third day, with less than a week to go, I still hadn't made a return flight up onto the platform.
Right.
And then finally, with all the grace of a man climbing into an upper bunk, I made it.
Okay, George, you're coming along fine. You're getting there. Let's try it again.
Oh, me.
You'll see the fireproof man. He seems impervious to fire. You see all the wild animals and all the free.
As the evening audience drifted from the midway, a marvelous mood would take over the circus grounds. This had become my favorite time, when in the stillness one could relax a bit. Such moments were short-lived, however. At 11 p.m., Bob would have me back on the platform, now launching me from the raise, a bar from which I could get more arc in my swing, which was essential if I were to reach Phil for the trick.
Ready? Up. Right. Get him back.
I had begun to feel muscles I never knew I had, and experience pains and aches I'd never felt before.
What is the joy of flying, do you think? What?
It's just the challenge. It's just another challenge that we've undertaken for ourselves, Fran and I, and the joy is just doing something that is very difficult, and it takes a lot of concentration and a lot of physical ability, a lot of mental.
Well, now is the pleasure is the pleasure after the performance, or can you get a sense of pleasure during it when
It's a trick that you should miss, but you hang on to. That's where the enjoyment comes.
Yeah, and you just grin at each other there.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Relax.
Unhappily, there was little to enjoy about the state of my own progress.
Right. Come on, work hard. Work hard. Get it up. See, if it's not perfect, you're giving up. I know you were crooked, but you're giving up. You just have to work harder to make up for it.
Bob Yerkes was becoming a veritable Simon Legree. He kept at me, insisting as I struggled to get back to the platform that I do it with a semblance of style before he'd take me on to the next step.
Next time. Next time. Legs up. Okay. Break hard. No. Right. Push off. Right. Hit it up there. Okay, no. This time to the net. This time we'll go down. Up. All right, we'll try one more.
Oh, God.
By the fifth day of practice, the condition of my hands had caused quite a run on the local pharmacy for Band-Aids and such things.
All right, George. Let's keep at it.
Dave, why don't you come on up?
Not me, George. It's dangerous up there. You can get hurt. I like my feet on the ground.
Is he charged low, or
Usually they come.
It took a lot of persuasion by Dave Hoover to get me into his lion's cage. He has what is known as a fighting act in the old Clyde Beatty tradition, in which he uses a chair, a pistol, and a whip.
No, let the lash just come straight down like that. No, you want to, no, that's what I say.
Well,
You can do it this way. It don't make any difference. As soon as you get them on the seats, you're safe.
Dave's act features 9 lions and 3 tigers of both sexes, a mixture which makes it both unusual and very dangerous. To my relief, he brought in just 2, Nero and John.
While I was in the Air Force, and I picked up some lions. It was kind of a hobby. And they started eating me out of house and home. So I went on a little circus, a little one-ring circus called Beers and Barns.
Hey, listen, that's enough. Sit down here for Papa. You haven't got that much mane yet.
The circus lion is better off than a zoo lion simply because they have to perform. They don't like to do that. That's what makes wild animal training dangerous. They're lazy by nature. If you give a lion a cage the size of a half a city block, You'd be very lucky to come in and find him walking. Most of the time, they'll be sleeping. In the wild state, a lion or a tiger exercises because they have to. They have to run down game, or they'll starve. So actually, a circus lion is better off than, say, the zoo lion, and much better off than his wild brother.
Give your undivided attention, please, to the steel-bound arena.
Before the act, I try not to think about anything. I'll say all lion trainers are afraid. They're afraid of their animals. If they're not, they're either fools, or if they say they're not, they're liars.
By Captain Dave Hoover.
Might come out one day and be in a good mood, and the next day might come out and be in a bad mood. You have just a matter of seconds to do what we call read them, or make up your mind whether they're in a good mood and which way they're going. So you're under a terrific amount of pressure. I weigh about 160 pounds, and a small lion weighs about 400 pounds. So if they knock you down, you just won't get up again. You won't get out of the cage, that's all. The worst I got was in Lubbock, Texas, in 1954. What had happened when the animal charged, I had a wristwatch on, and the cat took a swing at me and got his claws tangled in the expansion band, and I couldn't get loose. And I got to the door and got everything but my foot out. He was chewing on my foot like a piece of chewing gum, and every time a car would go by out on the highway, he'd bite down. So finally they got a piece of horse meat and threw it in the back of the cage, and the animal let go of me for the horse meat. I was in the hospital from the 3rd of January to the 15th or 16th of March. I worked with the lion when I got out of the hospital. I stood on one cane and pounded him on the head with the other cane. We worked him for about 3 more years. Then he got in a fight with another lion and was killed, so justice was done. And I have never wore a wristwatch or a ring or anything since. No jewelry. I'm not wild about my particular line of work. I don't think I would do it again if I had known when I was younger what it is. I wouldn't recommend it as a vocation. I hope my sons don't go into it. Even on a very cold day, I come out soaking wet from perspiration, and it's mostly from nervous tension. Well, I'll tell you, it's a great relief to get out. The only other thing I ever wanted to do, I wanted to run a grocery store. That's kind of a way opposite other end of the pole, I suppose, but I always was really interested in running a grocery store. I also kind of tended to want to be a farmer, but I understand there's no money in that at all.
In the lion's cage, Dave Hoover had been an instant father figure. His counterpart in the flying act would be Phil, the catcher.
Take your time easy and go, just like you're doing. Okay, Phil.
We had now arrived at the first crucial phase of the trick itself, the timing. At the exact command, I was to swing out to see if Phil could reach my legs. Even Mr. McCluskey came by to see how it would go.
Okay, relax. Stay with the bar.
Is it over this thing? I never can remember.
Yes, you're fine, you're fine.
Okay, ready? Relax. You was paying attention to him instead of the bar then.
I believe I'm tall anymore.
It's because you're thinking of him.
You think so?
Yeah. See, this is the whole idea. You just give him the bar. Get ready. Hup. That was good. Phil?
Reaching him, the first big flap of the wings. Though I must say, the perch up there seemed as precarious and elusive as ever.
You are just in time for a new performance. Right in.
Rain is what a tent show dreads most. All that gilt and splendor seems so forlorn. particularly when it's time for John Pugh to get the performance going. And of course it goes on no matter what.
This rain coming up has certainly hurt us. We naturally expect business for that first house on a Sunday. And there's only one way of looking at it as good on a blacktop parking lot. People do come out here, won't have to wade through the mud to get to the show. Because, I mean, we have been on lots where people had to walk 2 or 3 blocks ankle-deep mud, and they come and see that, and they sort of turn around. The tent show, I guess, is the only real circus left, as it was when it first started, and I hope it will go on, because in a building, it's a show. They sell them a show, we sell them a circus. But we take that new tent, and it's a real pretty thing to see it go up, and it stays that way for a few weeks, and then, unfortunately, as the season gets on, it gets torn to pieces. You say, well, it's just another tear we've got to sew up. But I think underneath the canvas, it's a nice feeling. It's different.
Empty seats, known as bloomers, are just one of the many grim effects that bad weather causes. But everyone pitches in. Circus folk are incurable optimists, perhaps because they have been conditioned by so much adversity. A man like Tibor Alexander, for example, who's been in the circus for 40 years, first as a famous tumbler, and then when he got too old for that, as a dog act impresario. And on a rainy day, he can sit in the cook tent with his friends and his wife, Irene, and it's as if the sky never was crossed by a cloud.
No, I like to go. Different town, you know. I like to moving as fast as possible. Every day I like better.
Well, we've not been home more than 15 years now.
You haven't been home for 15 years?
15 years. And he could retire any day, any time, but he don't want to.
Supposing an act is going badly, does that make any difference to you, really?
Oh, then I could not sleep. I'm so unhappy. You know, I could
worry all night.
Worry all night or anything like that. You know, I wait the next morning and the next show when I can correct that again. And I'm so happy when everything was so good. I could try something go wrong.
As for tears, well, there were times when frustration almost drove me to them.
A little late there. What do you do? Keep his feet on the raise? All right, Dennis, let's try it.
That afternoon, while I took a breather, Dennis went for a full twisting double, a new trick he was trying to add to his repertoire. It was truly a bummer day for all of us. Clown Alley was always an antidote. Generally, there are 2 types of circus clowns. The sad-faced tramps of the Emmett Kelly tradition, and then the white-faced clowns, a makeup which Kenny Dodd and most of his troupe prefer. What is it you're looking for? Is it something that's essentially comic, or
That is expressive.
Expressive.
Yes.
So that if you make a move with your mouth, it exaggerates it. Does it keep you young, playing with these children all the time?
Yes, because you go in very lighthearted, and there you're very happy, and I think as long as you stay happy, you'll stay young.
Yeah. See, the clowns also come out when things go wrong. The next day, I was done up in a fright wig and some spiffy makeup and taken to perform a charity date. To my chagrin, I found that children can be as frightened by clowns as pleased by them. But then we clowns can be intimidated, too.
Just don't step on my feet. That's the most terrible thing. Oh.
The clown is often referred to as a Joey, after Joseph Grimaldi, an English pantomime clown, known in his time, which was almost 2 centuries ago, as the Jupiter of joke, the Michelangelo of buffoonery. The main trick in being a clown is constant action, a lot of shouting, every movement exaggerated. All this producing what the program announces as maniacal madness and mirthful mayhem. The atmosphere under the circus canvas is unique. The color warm and golden, and the air is outdoor air, quite a change from the synthetic drafts of air conditioning. But the economic pressures of providing one's own roof, so to speak, have always been considerable. Frank McCloskey ran away with the circus 45 years ago and rose to the top of the Ringling organization before buying the Beatty Circus in 1955, against everyone's advice.
Mr. North had publicized many times in newspapers and told me over the phone that the circus was dead, which I couldn't hardly believe because we was packing and jamming them, and it seems like everybody wanted to see a tent circus.
But as long as children are around, I suppose the circus is as healthy today as it ever was 100 years
Yes, I don't think it'll ever die, especially a tented circus. To me, that is a circus.
Economics is nonetheless a harsh reality, and circus folk have always been good at methods of pinching the public purse, some of them quite subtle. Allegedly, the vendors, or butchers as they're called, sell popcorn and peanuts at the beginning of the show. Next in order, they come in with cherry ices, and the ingredients, all that sweetness and salt, begins to work up an enormous thirst in the audience. Further increased with the sale of cotton candy, and then when everyone's collective tongue is hanging out, in comes the soda pop, cases of it. But for the circus performers, economics are clearly not the prime consideration. To begin with, they get paid so little. But the people who face the perils of the high wire without a net, well, perhaps what a top secretary makes. So what finally is the compensation? I began to sense that it was that twice each day, these men and women push themselves right to the limit. They walk up to the edge and look over into the abyss. They seem to stack the odds against themselves. With every lion Dave Hoover incorporates in his act, he increases the chances that one of them will feel out of sorts and make a move on him. The closer the performer gets to his limit, the more he traffics with failure. Success hangs in the balance so precariously, but that's part of it. So when one reaches for the limits of possibility and makes it, there is an extraordinary rush of euphoria and excitement of having tempted fate and survived it.
Clyde Beatty's own personal collection of wild animals brings in curiosities from everywhere.
They wrap around their victim and slowly but surely squeeze him to death. A very affectionate snake. Our next attraction is Princess Anne, the world's smallest woman. El Diablo, our fire manipulator, to entertain you.
Back it up. Back up.
Fire!
Back it up. Back up.
That's something. This is your daughter here, is it? Does she perform in the act as well? What else do you do? Someone told me you handle the snakes as well, is that right?
In the circus family tradition, skills are still passed on down the line. The snake lady, I discovered, detests the python George and can't wait to turn it over to her niece. Fred Logan has 8 children and breaks one of them into the lofty world of elephant riding, while another rehearses for the aerial ballet. Monsieur Bloch is a typical circus patriarch figure, endlessly drilling his family in old and new routines. An eloquent coach, he even got me involved.
Attendez, vous allez voir, comme ça. Voilà. C'est pas difficile.
Pas difficile.
Non.
Hop.
Ouais.
Comme ça, oui.
Ouais.
Alors.
Hop.
Ah.
Serrez les bras. Faut tenir toujours les bras. Non, attrapez les mains ici. Non, 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 non.
Oups. Pardon.
So then we came down to the last and the most crucial day of practice. It would be the first time that Phil would actually try to catch me. He used to wince thinking about it. At my weight, I was surely the heaviest flyer ever to take to the air.
Okay, everyone, let's go nice and easy. Make sure we've got the timing. Okay, Phil, get ready.
Just a little bit more.
Stand straight. Relax. Chest up. Okay, stand straight. Hips forward. Okay, get ready.
Head up.
Up.
And then that disaster with my public performance scheduled for the next day.
Okay, George. Relax. You'll do it this time. Head up, arm down. Relax. Get your hips forward. Okay. Get ready. Hup. Hup. Okay. Oh, you should have put him on, Phil. He had that one. Okay, to there. That was a good one.
Because of the harness, I wasn't supposed to complete the trick. But instinctively, I turned and reached for the bar, and without the drag of the mechanic, well, perhaps it was just off my fingertips. Tomorrow would tell.
I'll never be the same, though, George. Look how you stretched me.
A straight line here, and a turn, and a straight line here. Give me some man. Carpet. Okay, about right there. Let's see if you can do it once more like that now.
Finally, instructions in styling for the next day. Those familiar circus gestures of acknowledgement, selling it, as they say. At least as an act, I'd come on with a certain flair and style, no matter what happened later.
Okay, now really sell it.
I had spent a sleepless night with the flying act music still ringing in my head. Da-da-da-dum. But with the performance only hours away, I began to worry about doing my trick without the harness, which psychologically I'd begun to rely on. Now, if I missed the bar and fell, it could be dangerous. If you don't manage to land on your back, well, broken necks have happened. These were not especially constructive thoughts, but then I was so new to it all. Circus people have a phrase for a neophyte. A first of May, they call him. And I was uncomfortably aware that was still my status. I began to envy those for whom the day was absolutely predictable. Just another Sunday matinee coming up for them, then the teardown and move to the next town. Already, George Wagron, the 24-hour man he's called, was out on the road putting up signs for the trucks and house trailers to follow. And then, before I knew it, the morning was gone and the show was underway. I paced around outside in my pink leotards, hardly able to watch the acts. Their order was so familiar to me that I knew when the lions came on, I had an hour and a half to go. The treadmill always moving, which I couldn't get off. And from Tibor Alexander's Wonder Dogs, well, that was only 15 minutes to go. On my mind now, it wasn't the danger as much as the thought of humiliating myself and the act. I've never known a performer or an athlete whose prayer at the moment of confrontation wasn't to survive it without embarrassment. Then I saw Phil and Dennis checking the net, and I knew the treadmill had taken me right up to the ringmaster's whistle.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, your attention please. Presenting the most daring, talented, and graceful exponents of aerial art seen beneath any big top in the world today, the Flying Apollo. And today, as a special added attraction, they will be joined in their trapeze spectacular by Mr. George Plimpton of New York City. number 3. And may we beg your indulgence in total silence during this unique performance.
So close, though, really. Ready. Almost.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and a wonderful audience on our flight. We sincerely hope that you've enjoyed the circus. Please take your time to come home.
I feel fine. I just so close. I had the blinking thing.
Good afternoon, everyone.
It had been so close. One hand right there on the bar, and the other must have just missed it. I couldn't understand why. And so as they began to dismantle the circus outside and close up the various concessions, well, we all decided I should take one more crack at it. It didn't matter that there wasn't anyone there. It was the best time anyway, when the public was gone and we had the arena to ourselves. I had some internal hemorrhaging in the shoulders from the strained muscles, but I don't think that or anything else would have kept me off the platform.
Okay, George, this is it. Get ready. Give him the bar. Up. Up. That's it. Help him up.
Way to go, George.
Just at the last, as they were pulling up stakes and the first trucks were driving off, John Pugh allowed me the privilege of a marvelous ritual called riding the tent. And since there are so few tents left, I thought what a rare honor to ride the biggest one of them all.
Okay, Moose, let her go! It's coming down!
As the final lines were let loose, the big top, itself the symbol of the circus, seemed to come to life beneath me. And as it stirred and billowed, I began to sense it as an actual protective entity which provided a refuge for a very distinctive and separate community. And it was tempting to think that if in my boyhood I had come to this and appreciated it as I had now, that perhaps I too would have stayed behind under its shelter.
With the exception of this one spectacular tip-of-the-hat to tradition that takes place in Milwaukee every July 4th, the circus parade has totally vanished from the American scene.
It disappeared partly because of the expense, but also because the pace of the American scene has changed. The main streets are too cluttered with traffic to consider the circus parade. That's not to say that the circus itself has been affected. There, as we've seen, everything goes on as before, and people come to see it. The young to be astonished, and the older generation not only to relive that astonishment vicariously, but to be refreshed by enjoying the skill, the excitement of an individual performance, and to be comforted that there is one tradition which remains unchanged.
And what a tradition it is.